As an addition to the interviews I've had with people in different professions and careers, today's guest is also someone that grew up and went to school in Southern California and was also at one time a Burbank resident. Having worked in the film industry as an independent filmmaker with experience as a screenwriter, cinematographer, model, actor, sound mixer, producer, and director, I will be talking to him about his career, how he chose the path he is on, his education and training, as well as his thoughts on what it takes to become successful in one's chosen career, whether in the film industry or in any other field. I thought his insight may be of interest to parents of students that would like to go into film. We will also be discussing some things that students should consider when trying to work out a particular job, profession, or career path for themselves. If you have a student that would like to get into the film industry, or a student that is still trying to figure out a career path for himself or herself, you're going to want to watch this show. So let's get on with it. Today, we have as our guest independent filmmaker Rob Watt. How are you doing, Rob?
Doing great. Thank you so much for having me on. I think about you guys all the time, and I'm very thankful to be talking with you this morning.
Very good. Now, you've worked in a number of different areas within the film industry, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I
Oh,
um, I started very early on. One of my first jobs was on the movie The Grudge, and I did uh, tree relocation for them. It was my very first job. I was 18 years old, and I learned the hard way that you get paid upfront.
oh, well, that doesn't sound good.
It was pretty tough. It was a good lesson to learn though. It was I was green and I didn't know who to talk to, and this is going to happen to a lot of filmmakers if they don't have a mentor to sort of coach them along the way. At that point, I didn't have a mentor, so I was largely relying on trial and error. But yeah, I learned the hard way. Make sure that you have your contract and you got your payment settled way up front in advance.
Oh, man. Now, I believe you've worked in some of the areas are scriptwriter, storyboard artist, cinematographer, producer, director, and others. Again, you've also done some work as a model and actor. So, did you work in all of these areas so that you can just gain experience in each of them?
So the modeling had me chuckling. I did a lot of work as acting. I didn't
Okay.
do I don't I mean, I'm sure there was a model thing here or there, but it was certainly not stable. But the acting was a good way for me to learn all the different roles that occurred on a film set. I got into acting in high school. My brother was 2.5 years older than I was, and he had done theater, and I saw how many friends he made in the theater program. So I followed in his footsteps. I did theater as a senior, made a ton of friends, went on to college at Loyola Marymount, joined the theater program there, had an absolute blast. Made a ton of friends, learned a lot about what it takes to put a production on. And when you boil filmmaking down to the actual editing process and to the story structure and scene structure, so much of it is derived from theater. So
Hmm.
I would highly encourage any young writers, any young directors, any young actors to put together a show, work out everything that they need to work out on a stage, get fluid with it because that's going to come in very handy when you're setting up films, because you're going to get on set and you're going to say, okay, what are the elements that I need for this scene, and you're going to recall from your theater days everything that is needed to make a scene coherent and cohesive.
Wow. Okay. Very good. That sounds good. Now, you've been working on a documentary about a Brazilian mixed martial artist, Fabricio Werdum. Now, what's happening with this film, and where do things stand at this time?
So Fabricio Verdum is widely regarded as one of the, if not the greatest heavyweight champion of all time in mixed martial arts.
Hmm.
He had a long career. in, Pride in Japan and also, in Brazil, and then when he moved to America, he ended up joining the, Ultimate Fighting Championships, the UFC. He worked his way up through the ranks, fighting the very best in the world, and 2010, he happened to beat the widely regarded best heavyweight champion of all time, which was, Fedor Emelianenko, and, Fedor was uh, a decade of dominance. Like, this guy was feared by everyone, and Fabricio shocked the world by beating him, and did so in a very, um, decisive fashion. It wasn't like, oh, edged out a victory. It was, submitted by triangle choke, and Fabricio went on from that to become the UFC heavyweight champion, and I spent 2 months with his fight team in Mexico, living in Mexico in a small town called Jiquipilco. Jiquipilco, is a very small village up in the mountains of Mexico. I definitely almost had, hypoxia. Definitely had hypoxia, almost had, elevation disease, elevation sickness. I was out for 2 days. My producer had to poke me and make sure I was okay on the 2nd day after I slept for 2 days. This
Now, this is having to do with just because of the altitude?
It was all altitude, yeah, we were training at a higher altitude than Colorado,
Oh,
and
wow.
we were up there, and when fighters are running, before a fight, there are some proteins that are released in their body that help them combat stress, help them combat fatigue, and also help their brain handle concussions. So, this film was a lot for me to take on, as an independent filmmaker. I was very blessed to have a amazing producer, Gabriela Banda, who was with me every step of the way. I could not have done it without her, and she opened up all these doors for me. I would say that as a young filmmaker, if you're gonna do independent film, especially even documentaries have the ability to change your life, but also have the ability to change the lives of the subjects that you're filming.
Hmm.
And I loved Fabricio and his brother Felipe, because I had trained with them prior to filming the documentary, and I knew their story, and I knew how.
You trained with him?
Yeah, I had trained with Fabricio and Felipe for about 4 or 5 years prior to shooting this documentary. I was always shooting commercials in their gym. They saw, what I was filming. They liked, the way I filmed things, and, so when it was time for him to fight for the title, we said, "Okay, well, let's make this happen," and we got him a really top level agent and made sure that we were able to start to finance the film, and, I was shooting commercials while I was in the fight camp in Jiquipilco, Mexico. So I was doing double duty. I was making a movie, I was shooting this documentary, and at the same time, I was shooting commercials to help, Fabricio pay for his fight camp. And, I had so much respect for the Verdun brothers because they, in a lot of ways, reminded me of my relationship with my brother. And, because my brother Hank and I have, endured tremendous hardships throughout our lives, watching the Verdun brothers, go through those things and, overcome those obstacles was instrumental in helping me carry on as well. And this film, Heavyweight, um, is deep in post-production right now. I've got amazing, amazing people on this that have contributed their time. I've got Academy Award winners that have contributed their time to this film. I've had generous, generous people that work at the very top of the film industry contribute to this film, because they've seen the material and they know that these people, deserve the best. And so the fight camp itself is a very intricate and amazing place that very few people are let into, because you have to be secretive about the techniques that are going on in the fight camp because you don't want to give away, what you're gonna be doing in the actual fight itself. But what I realized and as a documentary filmmaker, you're gonna realize this as well. Oftentimes, you go into a story thinking you know what it is, and when you're in the mix of it, things change and things evolve, and you have to be willing to sort of, adapt and move with it and create the story that's actually there. And so when I got into the fight camp, I realized this is a huge family. The way that these other fighters come around Fabricio and give him everything. They put their life on the line to make their friend a champion. That was what this was going to be about. It was gonna be about this unique story about these people who had endured tremendous hardship and were in many ways broken individuals, and how that had made them perfect for this opportunity to come alongside their brother and make him into a heavyweight champion.
Wow. Wow, that's like, I mean, that is quite a story right there.
It's powerful, and it definitely transformed me, as the filmmaker documenting it. I am so thankful to Gabriella, my producer, for, helping me get through it because it is a lot to take on. You have to realize that, as a filmmaker, an independent filmmaker, you are an entrepreneur, and there are no, 9 to 5 positions. You are working around the clock, and she would often have to remind me, "Hey, here's some water. Take a break, drink some water." Because when you're in the flow of things and you don't get retakes, you don't get the ability to shoot a shot over again because it's all happening in real time. You are so hyper focused on the moment. There's a photo of me, from the actual broadcast, the UFC broadcast of me following Fabricio into the stadium, and you can see on my face, I'm carrying a 35-pound camera on a glide cam, which is a very difficult thing to do, and the focus on my in my eyes is so intense because I know I've only got one opportunity to get this shot. If I mess this shot up in any way, I cannot retake it.
Hmm, wow. Well, okay, I know you created a, trailer for this, film, as a way of generating interest and anticipation for the film's release. So I'd like to go ahead and actually play that trailer.
Please do.
All right.
And every time I see those images, it's like I have a flashback of being there. I can feel what it's like to be in the camp. I feel the temperature of the mountains, and I smell the smells of the village. It's so wild. Um, it's so wild what making a movie can do to somebody. It's transformative.
Can you explain more about, like, what it took? What did you, do, or how did you create that?
Absolutely. So, it all began During the first writer's strike in 2007,
Wow.
I
Okay.
was I was a actor, and I was working in Hollywood, and I realized very early on that, acting wasn't necessarily all that I wanted to do because I didn't feel like I had any control over the story itself. I wanted to be a director. I wanted to have a say in what the final story was that was being told was. And in 2007, everything stopped. Everything was put on hold for the writer's strike, and we're still feeling the ramifications of that strike today, with all the remakes and the prequels and the sequels. But I had a realization during that strike. I was going to have to learn how to do everything in filmmaking from pre-production to post-production if I was going to survive the strike. Because 99% of my friends that I went to school with, whether it be for film or for anything in the entertainment industry at all, were leaving. They were packing their bags and they were going home. So it was very much a adapt or die moment. I started making short films. I was really inspired by a group at the same time they had started filmmaking. It was a group called Gnarly Bay, and they were out of Rhode Island. And I was inspired by the short films that they were making and posting online. And so I started to make similar shorts, and I started to take a little handy dandy Canon 7D to my friends' birthday parties, and we would shoot little tiny short films, and I would make custom birthday party videos, and I would edit them together in Final Cut or Premiere Pro, and I would put music to it, and I would, give it to them as a birthday present, and we would make all these amazing sort of road trip adventure films and everything. That's how I got into it. I was able to sort of take charge of my career because I did not want to be beholden to the economy, the system, the studios, anything like that. I actually went and saw Francis Ford Coppola speak at a screening for Youth Without Youth, which is a film that he did independently. Um, and he said, "You don't need these huge studios. You don't need all these semi trucks, and you don't need all these executives. You need one van, one camera, and about 10 friends." And that transformed the way I looked at the industry.
Hmm.
And from then I was like, okay, I'm going to do what Francis Ford Coppola did. I'm going to have my business that helps finance my films. And he had his vineyard, which he was able to make plenty of money from his vineyard and put into his films. But prior to his vineyard, he was completely hijacked and controlled by the studio system. And he had made multiple Academy Award films and was still being told, oh, no, you can't go do that other movie. You can't go do Apocalypse Now, even though he had already won 5 Academy Awards. So I learned
Interesting.
I learned very early on, if I was going to be in charge of my career, I was going to need to have a financing option outside of filmmaking that was going to allow me to move freely. So the skill set that I acquired, whether it be audio or camera, all that can be taught in about a weekend. It's not that complicated. Um, whether it be the cinematography, f-stop, the way the light ratio on the face, all that stuff can be taught in about a weekend. But the business side of things takes a lot longer, and certainly the acquisition of your taste and the what I call the soul print. When you watch a film or you look at a photo and you say, "Ah, I know exactly the filmmaker that made this movie."
Hmm.
That is the when I said that, making this documentary transformed me, there's a part of me that's on that film as well. It's not like I intentionally put it there. It's just it's automatic.
It's like a
Uh,
part of you.
yeah, you can't help it. It's
Right.
like, when you listen to my voice, it's a signature voice because my vocal cords are ingrained in such a way that that's the way I sound. Same thing goes for movie making. It's like everything that you've experienced in your life is going to be going into the way in which you see something and the way in which you transcribe an event and put it into the film.
That's a good point because see, as you know, having also done tutoring for us at one point, we work with students in all different areas. And one of the things in regard to, let's say, writing,
Mhm.
is we always tell students that they need to be able to uh, write. They need to be able to express themselves, and it really does take quite a bit of work to get somebody to have a feel for themselves, to be able to feel free, to be able to just write and convey their ideas, their thoughts, um, things like that. Because a lot of times they're not taught. They're taught to write as this way, or do this thing, or follow this format, or this template, or whatever. And it's when you find your own, like you said, your own, what do you call it, a soul print,
A soul print, yeah.
soul print. I've never heard that before. Okay. So when you find your own soul print in regard to writing, then that's when you really can express yourself. And I imagine with film, it's so much of a broader spectrum, because it's not just the writing, it's the actual visual, the sound, all of that. So I can definitely see that that is the case.
Absolutely, and I first of all, let me just say I loved working for you guys, and, I appreciate everything you guys had done for me, and I think about you guys all the time, so, anybody who's listening to this, I just wanna say Armando and Vicky are amazing, and whatever I can do to help facilitate anything, I will be happy to do it, but I really did enjoy working for y'all, and I love teaching. I love being, um, able to see a student who feels like they're stuck and that they can't possibly do something, and then explaining to them that it's very possible. All you have to do is just start. If you just start and you make iterations and you fail and you do not look at the failure as, oh, that's it, I pack it up, I'm done, but the failure is simply a stepping stone to getting to where you have to go. You have to go through the failure, you have to make the mistakes. That's the only way that you're going to learn, and you're going to make that sort of soul print, because all of those experiences, all those failures are going to add up to the way your outlook in this world, the way in which you view the world. And, writing is one of the most important things somebody can do, not just for themselves, but for the rest of the world. Because when people read something or they watch something and they take themselves out of their own heads and they look at the world from a different perspective, it is so healthy for the world. It's incredibly healthy for the world.
For those that may not know, Rob did some tutoring for us, and having gone uh, through his education as pre-med, he was working with a lot of students in higher level math, calculus, chemistry, biology, and physics. So he was working with the higher end, and had at one time considered going into medical school, but decided to take the path of filmmaking.
Yes, this is similar to M. Night Shyamalan's story because his parents were both physicians as well, and he ended up doing directing. What I would say is that the opportunities that came to me, early on in filmmaking were sort of a guiding light of like, "Hey, like, you just gotta keep your eye on the prize here and keep going because you're being told that as you're pursuing this, you're meeting the right people, and you're putting in the work to have the proper results." And so early on, as I was struggling, I met the right mentors, and those mentors came alongside me. They introduced me to other people that were invaluable to me in terms of people who had already made the films that I loved. And they could tell me, like, hey, you want to avoid these mistakes? No problem. Here's what you do.
Very good.
Mhm.
So doing a documentary is, I would imagine, be very different from doing a script driven film, such as a comedy,
Yes.
action, or adventure, that type of film. So which would you say is the most challenging, and why?
Uh, it's different. It's certainly different. I would say documentary filmmaking is powerful, powerful stuff. And it took me about 10 years to find the team that I knew that I was going to make movies with for the next 40, 50 years. Um, and you can test the waters of your abilities with documentary filmmaking. You can hone your craft with documentary filmmaking. You really do need a team um, to do the whole narrative feature. The whole narrative feature. Could I do the whole thing by myself? Yeah, I probably could, but it's not gonna be fun, enjoyable, and it's certainly not gonna be the best it could be. In order for the narrative feature to be the absolute best it can be, you need a team, and you need people who are on the field, and you need people who are overseeing and off the field, so to speak. So that's what I would say I've learned. The pressure is probably a little bit higher in the documentary world sometimes, only because you can't do retakes. If you're in the moment, especially for these, like one of my favorite documentarians is a guy named Matthew Hyman, a friend of mine, just incredible, incredible filmmaker. Also started out making, like, little travel documentaries. He made a movie called, City of Ghosts. He made a movie, called Cartel Land, and Cartel Land is literally him going through the streets of Mexico with these Sandinistas, people who are taking back their land from the cartels, and it's just incredible what he was capable of doing while behind a camera. And so I have immense respect for him, but it's also a taxing situation on the filmmaker. And Matthew just posted something earlier today that said, like, the documentary space is in trouble because these filmmakers are going into these real world scenarios and they're taking on tremendous trauma. And they're expected to just be able to compartmentalize and move on. And it's hard. It's really hard. Right now, I'm enjoying the heck out of my little chef show that I'm cutting, but you know, that's not traumatic. It's very enjoyable. I get to, like, work with an amazing Michelin star chef and, have amazing food and go travel amazing places and listen to amazing music. But that's not every job. Not every job is so positive. Some of these jobs you're in a war zone, or some of these jobs, a cartel is shooting at you.
Yeah.
So, um, I would say that the narrative filmmaking is a great way for you to practice communication and the ability to transfer your vision to a team. You get the best people, you get the best artists to take on your vision and to put it up on a screen. Now, it's never going to be exactly as you saw it in your head. It never will be. But if you are willing to go the journey, it will be hopefully better because these amazing artists are going to be able to bring in their own prints, their own soul prints, and it's going to congeal into something unique and special.
Very good. Now, you've also done quite a bit of cinematography using drones. So tell me
That's right.
about that.
So, in terms of the adaptability that I was talking about earlier, whenever the economy and the industry, they always have these ups and downs, and you have to be able to weather them. And so for a long time, and during the first writer's strike, I was able to adapt. I was able to pick up a camera, learn how to be my own cinematographer because I couldn't pay for a cinematographer. I had to learn everything about cinematography, and a lot of that comes down to watching the masters, watching the greats, learning from them, even taking inspiration from, older artists like Caravaggio is one of my favorite painters. Rembrandt is one of my favorite painters, and so you'll see that time and time again in my imagery of the films that I make. They're like, "Oh, that's Caravaggio," or "That's Rembrandt." But I would say that the reason why I pivoted to the drone work was because, I loved the feeling of being able to, soar. That was it. I just loved the idea of being able to soar. And so I remember when I was working on Heavyweight, I sent a drone up over the city, over this little village to capture it. I loved the images that came back from that, soaring over the village, understanding how this village operated. Um, and, it wasn't until many years later that I was in a job during the pandemic where I was operating 6 different cameras for a show. And while running audio, I was running the whole operation. It was a very large operation, and I was getting burnt out. And so I called up my buddy Wolfgang from Airwolf Drones, and I had put aside some money. I bought 2 drones. I bought an Inspire 2 and I bought a Mavic 2 Pro. And, I called up my buddy Wolfgang, who had been in the industry earlier in the drone industry at the proper time. I had encouraged him to get into it, and he had had tremendous success. And I called him up and I said, "Hey, buddy, I'm coming to work for you." And he said, "Okay, let's go." And I would say within a couple weeks, I think 2 to 3 weeks, we had our first big drone gig, and that was for the Boot Barn, spot, which was Boot Barn is this massive campaign. They do huge, huge fashion in the, cowboy space, in the, um, Middle America space, and it was a blast. We had so much fun. We went to 5 states in 7 days. And I remember being the cameraman that had the big heavy camera on his back all the time and being exhausted. And in this job, I got to roll up on set with my drone, pop it open, sit back, enjoy a drink, not a boozy drink, just a regular sparkling water,
A beverage.
a beverage of yeah, and, 'cause you can't drink and operate. And, I don't drink anyway, so it's fine. But, yeah, no, it's amazing. Like, some of these shows that I've been able to be a part of, for HBO Max, for Hulu, for all these different wonderful programs, they treat you very well because you're a specialty cam operator, meaning, you get paid better because not many people can do what you do. I had to get a license. I had to get a certificate in order to, operate as a drone operator
Interesting.
and as a cinematographer in the sky. And it's not impossible. It's just that most people aren't gonna take the time to do it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so if you want to adapt and you wanna survive, well, then you study for a week and you drive to the airport and you take the exam and you get your certificate, and now you're in a very small circle of people that can be drone operators and drone cinematographers. And that sustained me. You can see that, like, throughout my career, there's been all these little pivots that have helped me maintain a career in filmmaking. It's been medicine, pre-med, which allowed me to tutor. It's been cinematography, which allowed me to stay in the filmmaking space, right? That has paid for my food and my board for a decade, right? Cinematography. And then, during the pandemic, I transitioned to drones, and that has paid my way since. And so, um
Now, do you have to get a I somehow I heard that you have to have a pilot's license to be a drone operator?
That's right. Yeah, you have to take a exam. It's called a Part 107. And anybody who's interested in becoming a drone operator or aerial cinematographer, I'm happy to point them in the right direction. Drone operators, because we usually work in a two-person team. We have somebody who's flying, a pilot, and we have somebody who's operating the camera individually. And so I would often get called back as the cinematographer because of my previous cinematography experience on the ground.
Very good. Well, I've got a couple of videos that show some of the drone cinematography that you've done. I'd like to show a bit from those 2 videos.
Let's do it. I love it. I love watching this stuff because it reminds me of what a blast I had on that shoot.
I was just gonna say that it just looked like there was just a lot of fun.
Oh, so much fun. I met the I mean, that's like one of my A teams. Like, so the one of the head cinematographers on that was a guy named William Rouse, really talented cinematographer. Just yeah, all the people involved in that. But Wolfgang is my pilot partner. Wolfgang Weber, just absolute top-notch pilot, like drones for everybody in the business, drones for Beyonce, drones for all these, crazy, crazy high-level jobs. And it was an honor, like, to be able to work on that. And you could see the match cut there. I don't know if you saw, but like you're going over the road in the desert, right? And then all of a sudden you see the same exact sort of composition on the bridge from the San Francisco Bridge, and they call that a match cut in the industry. And it's a way of flowing from one scene to the next. So if you have a history, if you understand composition, you understand how match cuts work in the editing room, then you can pre-plan for it way in advance so that you can get all those elements in the field, knowing that later on in the edit bay you're going to stitch it all together.
So, well, like I said, it looked like it was a lot of fun.
Oh,
So,
it's so much fun. And the thing about working with friends is that you travel, you eat great food, you make art together. And if I could encourage anybody in the industry in the drone space, I would just say don't get frustrated with the sort of steep learning curve, because it's worth it. The San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge is a very difficult shot to get because you're not allowed to take off from the land. Um, it's a national park. You can't take off from a national park. So what you have to do is you have to get clearance from the Coast Guard, and you have to go out onto a boat in the middle of the gate of the bay, and you have to take off from a boat, and you have to land on the boat. So we had to coordinate catching this drone in our hands and taking it and letting it take off from our hands in order to get the shots that we wanted to get. So there's a lot of pre-planning.
very good. So, you mentioned also that you've done work for some big names, Netflix, HBO Max, Hulu, Nike, and those are just a few of them. So, how would you compare doing a job for one of these huge corporations versus doing your own independent film?
Well, every job is going to be different. I would say the future, so the filmmaking industry is always changing, it's always morphing. And if you're going to survive and hopefully thrive, you need to be able to be adaptable. And what I would say is that if you want consistency, then you need to invest in yourself, because the film industry itself doesn't necessarily care about you. They just don't. Unless you're making people a ton of money, which is, an option. Like if you are able to make people a ton of money and they see the value in that, they will, care. But money is not exactly the most proper incentive. It's not even the most powerful incentive. So I would say if you want consistency, invest in yourself and do independent things that showcase your skill set. And because at the end of the day, there's a lot of talkers, and the only thing that matters is product. You show people you're real. You show people what you're capable of putting together as a finished product, and that will speak way more than what you say to them verbally. So, working with these big companies, I would say it's quite impersonal. um, I just recently did a job for Sony, but I did a job for Sony through an agency. And so I had a great time on that job because I was working directly with this creative agency, and those guys were fun and creative. And but I wasn't interacting directly with the executives at Sony except for like one day. So in that sense, I would say It really depends on the person. Like, what type of filmmaker are you? Are you somebody who likes interpersonal relationships? Do you enjoy, having friends? Well, if you enjoy having friends, work an independent work independently and create that circle, that family, and find a way to make it worthwhile, in terms of financially. And that's why I have a coffee business that helps me do that. I literally took a page from Francis Ford Coppola, and I said, "Okay, I'm going to need to have a coffee business that's going to help me finance the films that I wanna make." And so, the big corporations, sometimes you take a job from those because they like your work, they know you're capable, and you need the money,
Mhm.
and so you do it. But, um I would say the most rewarding is oftentimes doing a small project that you don't, and sometimes as a drone operator, you don't even know what the project is until you show up on the day. So one time we showed up at JPL. Yeah, we're in Pasadena. We get a call from a buddy who's a helicopter cinematographer, right? He shoots for the news. We get a call from him. He's like, "Hey, can you come to JPL real quick and shoot some establishing shots for a documentary?" And we're like, "Oh, yeah, sure, we'll do that." So we show up at JPL and we shoot these amazing, shots with the Inspire 2, 6K raw footage, amazing stuff, right? That was for a documentary called Goodnight Oppie. And Goodnight Oppie was this amazing documentary that basically highlighted the traveling experiences of the Mars rovers. And so Wolfgang and I got to be a part of this amazing documentary. We actually I think we're the actual first practical shot, and everything is CGI until like our drone shot. And Spielberg saw that movie. A lot of like, it was considered for the Academy Awards. It was going up to the Academy Awards nominations. So that film was a documentary that really touched a lot of people, even though it was about you know, a robot, because it was good storytelling. I believe the documentary, director's name is Ryan White, I believe.
What was the
Um,
name of the film again?
it's called Goodnight Oppie.
Abi,
Um,
ABI?
OPPY. Goodnight Oppie.
OPP. Ah, oh, Abi. Okay, very good.
If you remember the '80s and a movie called Short Circuit,
Mhm.
it's very similar to Short Circuit because in Short Circuit, obviously, you have this robot and you're anthropomorphizing this robot. You're like, "Oh, I feel feelings for this robot." And they do a phenomenal job in Goodnight Oppie doing the same thing
Hmm.
because all of these engineers are working so hard to make sure that this rover succeeds on Mars.
Yeah,
And you should definitely watch it. And Wolfgang and I were very proud of being part of that.
very good. Now, you also said that if someone is considering going into filmmaking, that they should prepare themselves for perseverance.
Oh man, yeah.
Now, why do you say that?
Well, that's not just me saying that. That's Coppola, that's Scorsese, that's a lot of people, and
Some of
that
the big guys.
some of the big heavy hitters. I mean, they endured tremendous, tremendous hardship, and Coppola was essentially laying it all on the line in order to go do Apocalypse Now. He put in $1 million of his own money to go start that movie, knowing that if it was already started, the studio would be like, "Oh, we have to keep it going," even though they hadn't greenlit it, right? The executive that had greenlit it had left. Um, Scorsese was broke going into Goodfellas, which is, you know, abhorrent. You can't like, I can't even imagine, like, being so successful, being as great as Scorsese is, and then being financially broke going into, your later years. It's crazy. So, you need to remember that the knocks that you get, the failures that you encounter are simply they're like bricks, and you need to build a building out of these bricks. So every failure that you encounter, you're like, "Okay, great, learning from this." But never ever 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 sit and wallow and be like, "Oh, I failed. Woe is me." No, you can't. You just cannot do that. Otherwise, it's not for you. Like, this career is not for you because there's one guarantee if you decide that you're gonna try and do filmmaking, and that is you will fail. You will fail. There's gonna be multiple failures, and how you handle those failures and move forward is going to determine, how far you go.
But that is also true if you're going to be successful in anything.
It's true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, um, now, so whether you're creating a film or a commercial for a large corporation or doing your own independent film, you have to be creative. You have to figure out how the film or commercial is going to communicate exactly what it is that the corporations want, or you want to communicate exactly what it is that you want to get across in your own film. So, where do you get your inspiration for these?
My main inspiration was probably from my family.
Mhm.
My mom, I saw how incredibly hard she worked. I saw, um, the passion and the compassion that she had for her patients. Um, and so the amount of care that she exhibited, I think transferred to me as well. And I wanna pursue excellence no matter what the field is. I would say, you can take inspiration from any place. I take inspiration from my family. I take inspiration from my composer, Jason Pelsey. I take inspiration from my producing partner, Gray Damon, who's an amazing artist. And I take inspiration from the greats. I watch the Criterion Channel constantly. I'm always watching old films. I watch films that most people today never have heard of because I'm building my film vocabulary and bolstering my knowledge of shots. A lot of that appreciation comes from a man named Roger and James Deakins. James is his wife. They work as a team. They're incredible. Like, it's very, very unique to see a couple survive and thrive in the film industry.
Hmm.
And James and Roger Deakins have done a tremendous job of that. They work together as a unit. They're at the very top. They're just phenomenal filmmakers. I study his work to get inspiration. I study Caravaggio, I study Rembrandt, I study all the great painters of the past. There's 2 really great websites that I encourage filmmakers to attend without not going to Instagram, going to, Film Grab. Film Grab is great, and there's another one called Shot Deck, and Shot Deck is run by a gentleman named Larry Scher, Lawrence Scher. Lawrence Scher is a phenomenal cinematographer and a really nice, genuine dude. He just he's lensed, we call it lensing when you're a cinematographer for a film. He's lensed, um, amazing films. The last 2 films that he's probably best known for are Joker and Joker 2. But yeah, he's got this amazing website called Shot Deck, and you can literally go through and you can search like a search engine, different compositions. You can say stuff like, "I want a medium close up of a woman, and she feels isolated," or whatever, right? So you can put all those things into this directory, and it will provide you with films and screen grabs of those types of shots. And so you're able to sort of like bolster your film history and your film vocabulary through this directory, and it's absolutely incredible.
Well, I'll tell you, we've definitely covered a lot of stuff here today.
That's about 15 plus years of just filmmaking accumulated knowledge, and
Well,
I
let me
hope it
ask you this here:
helps.
is there anything else that you would like to say to either parents or students about going into filmmaking, or anything else that students should consider when trying to decide on a career or profession for themselves?
Yes. I would say this, take full responsibility. If you take full responsibility, you will be able to push forward much easier. And, easier is the wrong word, but you'll be able to push forward more efficiently. And by that I mean, if you say to yourself, "Okay, this film is not going to get finished unless I push it to the finish line," then you will have the incentive to get it done. You know, part of taking on that responsibility is honing your craft, studying movies, like going on the Criterion Channel and ingesting old films and writing down, "Why did that shot make me feel that way? Why did and how can I recreate that emotion in another human being?" And okay, well, I need to go meet other professionals. Okay, well, I take full responsibility. I have to go to that film festival. I have to go mingle. I have to go outside of my small bubble that I've constructed, and I have to go meet new filmmakers. I have to go meet new producers. I take full responsibility for that, for putting myself in the line trajectory of meeting other people. I take full responsibility for the way in which, the film is received, right? Like, I cannot say, "Oh, this shot was really hard to get because, it was windy that day," or, "You have no idea how hard it was to climb the mountain." Audience doesn't care if you were sick that day. They don't care if you were struggling to get the shot. Doesn't matter. All that matters is how the final product makes them feel.
For anything that if you want to be successful in that particular field or career, as an artist, as a writer, as a journalist, as an anything, whatever you want to do, that is basically what you have to do. You have to take full responsibility to make sure that you just make it happen. You can't just accept um, losses and say, "Oh well, I couldn't do it because of this." You can't make excuses. I mean, you can make excuses, but then you have to continue on and finish the job anyway and get it done anyway and be successful anyway. It's you have to just continue on until you complete the job and it is successful and it is to your own actual standards.
Absolutely.
I think that you shared with us a lot today that can help students to be successful in whatever field they choose to go into. So I want to just thank you very much for joining us today, and I think and for sharing your thoughts. I think it's been invaluable.
Thank you. Thank you, Armando. It's been a real honor for me to be able to sit and chat with you. I appreciate it. Anytime you want to chat, you let me know.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll definitely talk to you later.
All right, perfect.
Okay.
Thanks,
All
Armando.
right. Very good. All right. Bye. Well, I want to thank all of our listeners and all of those watching on YouTube today for joining us. I hope that you have found today's show to be valuable and informative. If you like today's show and you haven't already, please subscribe so as not to miss any of our upcoming interviews. For now, this is Armando Salcido signing off, and I hope to see you again next week. As mentioned at the beginning of the show, Learning with Success is sponsored by Success Tutoring Online. Our administrative offices are located in Burbank, California, but we provide tutoring or academic advancement to students throughout the United States.